In the year 2326, Samhan Empire Mount Seol Ake frontline base. Voices echoed everywhere, people talking urgently about capturing someone, because if they fail, they would be the ones to suffer the consequences. Meanwhile, that someone was completely confused as to why he was being chased. What did he even do to deserve this? He was struggling to catch his breath, but he couldn't stop, because the moment he did, he would be caught and killed on the spot. Because of his fatigue, little by little, the people chasing Kim Tae-ju were getting closer. But destiny had not abandoned him yet. Finally, after running for so long, he saw a faint light ahead. As soon as he broke out of the thick trees, he started coughing up blood due to his heart condition. Unable to endure the pain, and with nowhere left to run, he dropped to his knees, and the people chasing him finally caught up to his location. They already knew that Kim Tae-ju's condition would worsen after being chased for a long time, eventually triggering his seizures. After all, they were fully aware of his condition, what they called a mana reject, and leading this group was Jang In-dong, a low-ranking beginner awakener. Now that Kim Tae-ju had reached a cliff with nowhere left to escape, the chase finally came to a stop, with nowhere left to go. Kim Tae-ju demanded answers from In-dong, asking why they were doing this to him. In-dong only mocked him, saying that it was such a simple reason. Yet he didn't even realize that, as a reject, he should have died like the trash he was long ago. As he pointed his sword at Tae-ju, In-dong blamed him for surviving until the age of 29, saying that it had gotten on her nerves. Tae-ju was confused and asked who this her was that In-dong was talking about. His hands began to tremble as he started to realize who this woman might be. Gathering what little courage he had left, he asked if it was Honda Mitsui. And just as he feared, his guess was correct, as In-dong did not deny it. Now that there was nothing left to talk about, In-dong suddenly charged forward, sword in hand, aiming straight at Tae-ju. Before Tae-ju could even react, a blade pierced through his body, and the force of the attack sent him flying. Now that they had succeeded, In-dong grew more confident that Lady Mitsui's two sons would be the ones to inherit the Paju territory. As he said his farewell to Tae-ju, his body continued to fall down the cliff, and before we continue the story, let us go back 300 years, to a certain day in the year 2026, when everything seemed completely normal. But a single event, when the sun was eclipsed, changed everything into something far more sinister. Suddenly, an unknown power called mana descended upon the earth. As a result, 90% of humanity was annihilated, a catastrophic loss unlike any other disaster in history. It disrupted the climate, caused cities to crumble, and just like that, civilization collapsed. After that phenomenon, 300 years passed, and by the year 2326, the survivors had adapted to mana and rebuilt civilization. However, with the emergence of magical beasts and poisonous plants mutated by mana, a new war began. As the war dragged on, a caste system based on mana aptitude was established. Taeji's father was a top-tier awakened, a master and brigadier general, Kim Wongbang. Despite being the eldest son, Taeju was nowhere near his father's level. He suffered from a condition called mana reject, slowly dying from mana poisoning. Going back to the story, a laugh echoed across a parallel world, the voice saying that he had struggled his whole life to become immortal, yet no matter how he looked at it, this was not the heavens he had expected. As he observed the buildings of his clan, they were mixed with bizarre structures, making him wonder what those things were, and where exactly he was. A smile formed on his face as he noticed a man lying on the ground. He asked him if he had any idea what this place was. The man he was asking was none other than Kim Tae-ju, lying on the ground while barely clinging to his life. As he slowly opened his weary eyes, he wondered how he could still be alive after falling from such a great height. Seeing that Tae-ju wasn't answering, the man began walking toward him. Using an unknown power, he lifted Tae-ju up, forcing him to stand and reveal his face. As the two faced each other, something unusual happened. The old man's name was Tang, the patriarch of the Sichuan Tang clan, the pinnacle of poison and hidden weapons. When his world, the Jianghu, was swallowed by the demonic cult, he did not simply stand by. With a single handful of poison, he melted the so-called heavenly demon, the leader of the demonic cult. He became the absolute master of Murim. And the reason Tae-ju knew all this was because the two of them shared the same soul. This fateful encounter happened while Gunnak was staying at his residence. In his twilight years, he was focused on cultivation, seeking ascension, floating in the air with his legs crossed. The moment he opened his eyes, their souls became connected as one. As soon as they recognized each other, their memories began to flow into one another. Taeju couldn't believe what was happening, asking Tang if he was truly him. As their memories intertwined, Tang couldn't hide his fascination. The young man before him was his counterpart from another world, sharing the same soul. Despite his overwhelming strength in the Jianghu, Taeju was weak and burdened with a condition known as mana reject. Even though they possessed the same potential, Tae was despised by others. Even the people he called family had rejected him because of his condition. Now, Gunnak finally understood. The place they were in was their mindscape all along. He is him, and Taeju is Gunnak. With the help of Gunnak's experience and knowledge in the Jianghu, he was confident that if Taeju began cultivating using his methods, he too could become the supreme master of the world he lived in. As Taeju opened his eyes within the mindscape, an immediate change occurred. A new power began to flow through him, and he was told to use this power to live however he desired. As the mindscape slowly faded away along with Gunnak, his real body remained lying on the cold, hard ground. The last words Gunnak left him with were a wish for good luck in battle, warning that the future would not be kind to him. After hearing those final words, Taejo regained full consciousness, realizing that what had just happened was not a mere dream. The proof was clear. Gunnak's knowledge still remained within his mind, but what use was it if he simply lay there, waiting for death? Forcing every ounce of strength from his body, he gripped the earth, telling himself that he had to survive. He needed to learn the martial art that made Gunnak the supreme master. The art that grew stronger, the more poison it consumed, the formless primordial poison spirit art. Fortunately for Taeji, poisonous plants were scattered all around him, and after plucking them fresh from the ground, he curled his body and began to chew on the poisonous plants he managed to gather. He ignored the taste because he knew that if he wanted to survive, he had no choice but to eat them. If he could convert the poison he consumed into internal energy and form a poison essence, creating a dantian that harbored poison, then he could sever the fate of a reject by reconstructing his body. And with this newfound strength, he would survive, and he would make them all pay for what they had done, starting with none other than Jang Indong, the one who had merely killed him. Hours had passed since Taeju fell off the cliff, but instead of leaving without confirming his death, Indong and his men went down and began searching for him. They wanted to make sure that Taeju was truly dead before returning, yet after hours of searching, they still hadn't found his body. This made Indong feel uneasy. How difficult could it be to find a single corpse? After a while, they finally spotted Taeju, but seeing that he was still breathing and sitting upright, they were confused as to how he had survived both his injuries and the fall. Not only was he alive, but they could also sense an unusual aura within him, and he remained calm even as they approached. They wondered if what was happening to Taeju was a mana reaction, but they were wrong. He was not undergoing a mana reaction. He was using poison essence to accumulate internal energy. This was highly suspicious for someone labeled as a mana reject, but Indong paid it no mind and simply ordered his men to kill Taeju before something unforeseen could happen. His men immediately moved, drawing their weapons to finally kill Taeju and complete their mission. Despite the danger, Taeju kept his eyes closed, but the moment a blade approached him, threatening his life, he finally opened his eyes, now fully prepared for what was coming. Using his newly gained power, he deflected the attack with his bare hand, leaving Indong's men in shock. They couldn't comprehend what they had just witnessed, nor how Taeju had survived. Looking at his hand and newfound strength, Taeju was fascinated. Was this what internal energy felt like? Clenching his fist, he thought to himself that this was enough. With this power, he could finally make them pay for what they had done. Despite nearly dying at their hands earlier, he couldn't help but smile, because now he didn't need to search for them anymore. They had come to him themselves. Indong started laughing. He couldn't believe the relaxed attitude coming from Taeju, especially when he didn't even have a marking like him. Despite not having any marking, it didn't faze Taeju one bit, because after seeing his own capabilities, he knew it was enough to deal with them. What Indong was referring to were the rank markings that appeared on the face, used to classify awakeners from master down to user. Jang Indong was currently a beginner, and in Mirim terms, he was akin to a third-rate martial artist, making Taeju certain that Indong was no match for him now. With confidence, he asked Indong if he was done saying his last words. Hearing this, Indong called him an arrogant bastard who didn't know his place. Taiju rummaged through his pockets and pulled out a handful of coins. Using these coins as weapons, he intended to repay everything they had done to him in full. Indong called Taiju insane, thinking he must have hit his head too hard and lost his mind for believing that coins were enough to deal with them. As punishment for his foolish bravado, Indong declared that this night would be his last, commanding his men to finish what they had started. Meanwhile, even though this was Taiju's first battle using his newfound power, his mind felt strangely calm. He wondered if it was because of Gunak's memories that had merged with his own during that fateful encounter. Even though mana had rejected him, the path of the poison demon still remained within him. Because of this, he now had the confidence that he would survive, as long as he could deal with Indong and his men here and now. Just like in Gunak's memories, Taiju used the flying dagger art, swift strike, and flung all the coins toward Indong's men. With precise accuracy, not only did he hit everyone charging at him, but each coin struck a vital point their heads. They were completely powerless against the attack, their eyes rolling back as they dropped instantly, killed on the spot. But Taiju was far from done. Using the blood seal poison palm, he instantly closed the distance. With his palm poised for attack, he focused on Indong, who stood at the back, leaving him shocked at how everything had unfolded so quickly. Because of how heavy the impact was, Indong's body was sent flying far away from his position. Seeing their platoon leader get taken down so easily, one of the soldiers immediately tried to fight back, grabbing his gun from his holster. He pointed it at Taiju, and with the distance between them so close, he was certain that no matter how fast Taiju was, he wouldn't be able to dodge a bullet at point-blank range. But this was where he was wrong. He pulled the trigger, yet Taiju was no longer there. All the bullet hit was an afterimage. And as Taiju passed by the soldier who fired at him, the man's head separated from his body, calling him a slowpoke, though the man couldn't hear it anymore, as he was already dead. Now that no one else remained, Taiju began walking toward Indong, who was still barely breathing. As Indong struggled to cling to life, he asked Taiju what he had just done to him. Seeing how an awakener like Indong was rendered powerless from a single strike, Taiju came to the conclusion that awakeners were vulnerable to poison. Still unable to comprehend what had happened, Indong asked how Taiju was able to use such a skill without any markings. Taiju thought that Gunak would probably be offended hearing that, but instead, he asked Indong how it felt now that their roles had been reversed, that he was the one dying. He questioned whether Indong felt even the slightest guilt for trying to kill him earlier, and if he regretted his actions. Thinking he might still have a chance to live, Indong began apologizing, repeatedly calling Taiju's name with respect. But instead of accepting his apology, Taiju grabbed Indong by the neck, slowly tightening his grip as he lifted him into the air. As a last resort, Indong began threatening Taiju, reminding him that there was a powerful figure backing him. But Taiju didn't care, and the moment his stepmother was mentioned, he ended Indong's life with his bare hands. Despite Indong's gruesome death, Taiju's eyes never wavered, as this was only the beginning. He steeled his heart for what lay ahead, especially now that he had begun baring his fangs. A small smile formed on his face. It slowly twisted into something far more sinister, as he had no intention of going down quietly after enduring years of discrimination. The Samhan Empire, a nation founded after the Mana Cataclysm, was formed by integrating the former territories of Korea, China, and Japan. Taiju's hometown of Paju also belonged to the Samon Empire, a small and highly impoverished city, and at that very place, his father, Kim Wongbang, suddenly received news regarding Taiju's discharge. He was informed that there had been an assassination attempt on him during his unit deployment. The report stated that First Lieutenant Jang Indong and his squad had ambushed Taiju on a cliff during a reconnaissance patrol. Afterward, Second Lieutenant Kim Taiju had somehow survived the assassination attempt, but was officially discharged and had since gone missing. Additionally, the report claimed that First Lieutenant Jang Indong and his squad had been attacked and devoured by monsters while fleeing the scene. Wongbang wondered why such a thing had happened, but upon further investigation, it seemed the hit had been ordered by Japanese-affiliated officers. The moment Wongbang heard that it was Japanese-affiliated, he immediately had a suspicion of who the mastermind behind this was. He quietly murmured to himself, questioning if this was Mitsui's doing. Honda Mitsue was the daughter of a prominent Japanese family integrated into the Saman Empire, and the mother of Taeju's half-brothers Taepyeong and Taecheon. He believed that Mitsui had attempted to assassinate Taeju in order to pass the Paju territory to her mana-compatible sons, as she had long been waiting for Taeju's death. But seeing that he had survived even at the age of 29, her patience must have run out, leading her to seek external help for the assassination. Wunbang thought that such measures were unnecessary. Since Taeju was already destined to die if she had simply waited a little longer. But this was still a serious matter. However, with Taeju's situation being dire, they still relied heavily on the financial support of his wealthy in-laws. Because of that, he felt he had no choice but to cover up the incident to avoid losing that support. Having made his decision, he told his subordinate that he would handle everything and that he could leave. As a mana reject, Taeju was bound to die from a mana rampage. Sooner or later, living until the age of 29 was already considered a miracle. He knew that Mitsui's actions had crossed the line, but Wubon believed it was better to overlook it for the sake of Taepyeong and Taechon, who would truly inherit the territory, rather than Taeju, who was already at death's door. And now that he had received news that Taeju was missing, he assumed he would never see him again, nor did he have any intention of searching for him. Meanwhile, Taeju is now free and is looking at the Samhan Empire territory, Mount Jiri's magical beast border zone. Amazed by the view, he still can't believe that he can see Guri from above. Suddenly, a fellow approaches him, asking if this is Taeju's first time seeing the panoramic view of Guri. Taeju answers, saying that he hasn't been here for very long. Because of this, the man warns Taeju to be wary, as there are many dangerous criminals around, so he needs to stay alert. Advice Taeju is thankful to hear. The man keeps blabbering, but Taeju lets it be, since he knows that the man is a kind person who even offers good advice. Taeju is still not used to the kindness of other people towards him, especially because, not too long ago, there were people who tried to assassinate him in the military. So, in order to raise his chances of survival, he cut all his ties, and after his discharge, he went to find a place to grow stronger, and the place he found was the free city of Gori, and he is now traveling alongside some people toward that place. The reason for choosing this place is because the Empire's public authority here is weak, making it hard for his family to track down his location. Not only that, it is also full of poisonous magical beasts and toxic herbs, making it the perfect place to train his martial arts. Martial arts is still an unfamiliar concept to him. The fortuitous encounter he had right before dying, soul-sharing from the martial world, the absolute poison demon who shared his soul, Tang, and the primordial formless poison spirit art that he received from him. Now that he thinks about it, instead of getting killed, he gained this opportunity because of his unfortunate encounter with Mitsui, which ended up helping him instead. He wants to pay them back for trying to kill him, but he still lacks the strength and money to stand on his own. So for now, he continues to grow stronger while working as a porter on Mount Jiri. While going back to their group, the talkative kind man asks who Taeju thinks is the strongest among them. For him, the strongest is the female swordsman, a pro-awakener whose name is Lee Hanol, considered to be at regular rank. It also amazes Taeju, since the woman looks young. And when compared to Jang Indong, this woman is one level higher than him. After taking a closer look, Taeju notices something wrong with how her mana is acting. Han Yul starts walking wobbly, her face flustered while holding her body as if she is feeling chilly. Then suddenly, her eyes turn white. She falls to the ground, unconscious, while the others are confused about what just happened. But after seeing the insect that came out of Hanol's body, they warn each other not to get bitten by the mutant three-striped mosquito if they don't want to end up like Hanol. Meanwhile, Taejo doesn't panic and simply keeps observing the mosquito as it flies away. One member of their group, with a staff, tells them to move away, saying she will handle it herself. She starts attacking the fleeing mosquito with a large ball of fire. Seeing how destructive that attack is, even Taeju and his talkative friend think that it is overkill for such a small mosquito. Still, Taeju doesn't understand why they are making such a fuss, so the talkative man explains that if that mosquito bites them, their mana temporarily disappears. And in severe cases, people even faint, just like what happened to Hanol. Many parties have been wiped out by a mere mosquito before, so it makes sense why everyone is on edge. Looking closely at Hanol's condition, And recalling the talkative man's explanation, Taeju thinks that this matches the description of a poison in Gunak's memories. So instead of just standing there, he uses this chance to examine Hanal using his poison spirit art. Their hands start shaking from nervousness, since this isn't an area where mosquitoes usually appear. So he informs their team leader that they should retreat, which he agrees to since the strongest among them has also fainted. Suddenly, a rustle in the tall grass can be heard. It instinctively catches his attention, wary of the incoming danger. He tells everyone to start preparing, as there might be an incoming battle. But it is just a rabbit, still a magical beast, but at the bottom of the food chain. Seeing that it is nothing to worry about, some even start laughing, while others let out a sigh of relief. They inform the rest of the group that it is all right now to relax and that they can start heading back, but this is where they are wrong. Suddenly, an attack from out of nowhere strikes his neck, decapitating them instantly, while their red-haired member is left shocked by what she has just seen. As their lifeless bodies fall to the ground, the true culprits begin to reveal themselves, one by one from the surroundings. Green skin and muscular bodies, characteristics of monsters known as orcs, and there are a huge number of them. They let out a massive roar, making the air tremble and causing even more panic among Taeju and his party. Even so, their mage keeps her composure, telling the others to take the wounded and fall back while she tries to buy them some time. Even the talkative man starts to go quiet as worry begins to take over. Meanwhile, Taeju insists that he will stay behind instead of following the others who are already running towards safety. He cannot understand what Taeju is planning to do, especially since they are powerless and only serve as porters. But with the number of orcs, Taeju still wants to lend a hand. He carries Hanyul and places her on the back of the talkative man. Still, the man tries to convince Taeju to come with them, saying that whether he stays or not will not change anything. Taeju insists that he will not change his mind. He urges him that there's no time left, that they need to go now, and that he will stay behind to provide what little support he can to their mage. Finally, he lets Taeju go, telling him that he will be right back after getting some help. Meanwhile, Taeju can't help but smile, as he will now be able to do what he wants. Before jumping into action, he keeps thinking that something feels strange. Along with the mosquito, the orc's movements seem somewhat organized. Still, the mage continues doing her best. She manages to reduce the number of orcs, though only by a little. Because of their overwhelming numbers, some orcs slip past her and begin heading toward the porters, which makes her worry. So instead of continuing her attacks at the front, she suddenly halts. She creates a wall of fire surrounding herself and the orcs that might pass her, in order to stop them from reaching the porters. Seeing this, Taejo is impressed by her prowess, but because of that very decision, she leaves herself vulnerable to the orcs attacking from the front, and now her own life is in danger because she chose to protect others. Meanwhile, in the celestial realm, where a floating island can be seen, a pavilion surrounded by sakura blossoms stands, with a man calmly sitting as he enjoys the view. It has been a month since Tang-gun-ak arrived here, something that would not have been possible if he had not met Taeju. Through the new knowledge of a world called Earth that he gained through soul sharing, he achieved the enlightenment he had been searching for over a long time. And now, he has finally reached the ascension he so desperately desired, leaving behind only his clothes in the mortal realm. But instead of feeling joy, he clenches his fist so tightly that the veins begin to bulge, because he did not know that the celestial realm he longed for was meant to be a prison, one that locks away scum like them. The scum he speaks of is none other than another old geezer, riding his sword through the air while laughing maniacally. It is the sword immortal, but they are not the only ones. From sect founders to legendary masters, they are all here in the celestial realm. Seeing how they act like children at play, Gunnak cannot believe that he wasted all those years just to arrive in a place like this. Still, he looks on the brighter side, since that connection from before is what led to this result. Remembering those moments, he cannot help but wonder how Taeju is doing right now. They share the same soul, yet because of their different environments, he became an absolute martial master of the martial world, while Taeju lived the life of the weakest, rejected by everyone. So he hopes that his power can at least bring Taejo some measure of happiness. And, in order to surpass the masters Gunnak saw in Taeju's memories, he must reach the 7th star of the primordial formless poison spirit art. So he hopes Taeju grows stronger quickly. When the right time comes, Gunnak wonders if fate will allow them to meet again, for that day he has already begun searching for new things to teach him. While he is busy looking ahead at the future, something suddenly hits his head. It is the sword immortal, mocking Gunnak for looking down on swordsmanship and relying on petty flying daggers. Unable to endure the mockery, even Gunnak begins chasing after the sword immortal. Going back to Taeju's world, the mage of their group is now in grave danger. Before her head can be severed from her body, Taeju realizes that now is the right time to act. He leaps forward to save her from being killed. Striking the back of her neck, he knocks her unconscious. Meanwhile, Taeju does not stop and now plans to deal with the orcs himself. Using a wide-area hidden weapon technique he has just learned, he begins throwing a handful of coins into the air toward the orcs that are trying to harm his group. Because of how fast the attacks are, the orcs are left powerless as their lives are cut short, the coins piercing through their bodies. Ending the attack with a superhero landing, all the coins he used fall back onto the ground. Seeing the lifeless bodies of the orcs, Taeju cannot believe they were wiped out so easily, leaving him satisfied with his power. Meanwhile, he wonders what to do about the girl. He was in such a rush to save her that he did not mean to knock her out cold. Still, he does not want it, especially since he does not want his strength to be discovered. Even if they were just orcs that mana users could normally handle, it would not make sense for someone like him, a mere porter. So before anyone else arrives, he plans to leave the area to avoid suspicion. Even so, he cannot help but smile. To think that he would have these kinds of concerns now, when just a month ago he was a mana reject. The encounter with Gunnak truly changed his life. Before leaving, he takes out his fanny pack. He begins picking up the coins scattered on the ground that he used for his attack, grumbling about how inconvenient the hidden weapon arts are since he has to collect them one by one afterward. This would not be an issue after reaching the 7th star, but for now, he has no choice. After picking everything up, he notices that one coin is missing. Walking away from where the battle took place, he starts searching for the missing coin. Finally, he finds it. It is lodged in a tree. Before picking it up, he notices the mosquito flying around, the same one that caused trouble for their group. Instead of the coin, his attention shifts to the mosquito. With a swift motion, he catches it in a single try, something even Saitama could not do despite being bold. Looking closely at the mosquito, he notices how it circulates poison through the body, scattering internal energy. That is why, when awakeners are bitten, their mana temporarily disappears. As expected, this poison is similar to the energy-scattering poison from the martial world. But unlike there, here it is far more dangerous, as there is no known cure. Without an antidote, the only real solution is protective gear. This makes Taeju wonder if he can figure out its exact composition. He could use Gunnak's knowledge to create a medicine similar to the antidote for energy-scattering poison. To understand it fully, he needs to test the mosquito itself. Because the benefits outweigh the risks, Taeju does not hesitate and immediately begins chewing on the mosquito. And, just as he expected, the composition is similar. Now he only needs to find the right herbs on Mount Jiri to finally create an antidote. Thinking about how much money he could make from this, he begins to salivate. He plans to test it out as soon as he gets back. But before he can leave, something catches his attention. After a moment, his eyes widen at what he sees. Standing before him is not just a simple orc. Compared to the ones earlier, it towers over him. It is none other than an elite orc, a variant far more dangerous than the ones he faced before. This is a variant that Taeju has only heard about in rumors. Not only does it possess overwhelming strength, it can also converse like a normal human. He cannot help but feel confused, wondering what is happening on Mount Jiri, why monsters that are not supposed to be here are suddenly appearing one after another. But it seems Taeju has no time to dwell on it now because the elite orc will not wait for him to gather his thoughts. Using its brute force, it slams its massive axe into the ground, splitting everything in its path. Good thing Taeju manages to dodge just in time. If he had not, his body would have been cut in half. Seeing its destructive power, Taeju realizes that it must be an expert rank monster, or perhaps even higher. It is possible that none of his current attack techniques will work on it, so instead, he begins the fight with probing attacks. He rummages through his fanny pack and launches a barrage of coins toward the elite orc. Just like before, this is the same technique he used to deal with the earlier orcs, but unlike before, every single coin shatters upon impact, failing to leave even a scratch on the elite orc. This is within Taeju's expectations. He already knew that would not be enough to defeat such a monster. Even so, he does not give up. Instead, he starts formulating a plan to deal with his enemy, whether it is his swift strike, dagger burst, or even his blood seal poison palm. He runs through every option in his mind. The elite orc suddenly lets out a massive roar, far louder and more powerful than the ones before. The sheer pressure makes cold sweat run down Taeju's face. At that moment, he realizes that he cannot afford to hesitate any longer. He must fight with everything he has. He cannot help but feel disappointed in himself. His first real attack had already failed, and he thinks that if Gunnak were to see this, he might consider him pathetic. He regrets becoming too full of himself after how easily he handled the pack of orcs earlier. So now, no matter what stands in his way, he plans to keep attacking until it falls, because that is the way of the supreme poison demon. As Taeju charges toward the elite orc, it does not back down, raising its massive axe to intercept his attack. The two clash, Taeju with his palm strike, and the elite orc with its axe. From the impact, Taeju coughs up blood, something he did not expect. The sheer force of their collision creates an explosion around them, but all Taeju manages to do is damage the elite orc's weapon. It is not even destroyed. Meanwhile, he is left kneeling on the ground, struggling to gather strength after losing the clash. It is shallow. His attack was not even enough to leave a scratch on the elite orc's body. Because of this, Taeju realizes he has no other choice. He prepares himself to attack again and again, ready to risk his life, until one of them falls. But just as he steals his resolve, a sword suddenly appears. It strikes the elite orc's body in a flurry of movements so fast that they are impossible for an ordinary eye to follow. The enemy that Taeju struggled against is now screaming in pain before being defeated in an instant. At that level, Taeju realizes that the one who killed it must be at least master rank. Now, he begins to regret not leaving the area sooner. As he hurriedly tries to think of an excuse, the man who killed the elite orc calls out to him. Calling him a punk, he asks if Taeju was the one who dealt with the pack of orcs lying on the ground when he arrived. Jung Hak, the guild master of Nogoden, keeps probing Taeju's identity, asking what his true name and background are. Hearing his condescending tone, authoritative presence, and witnessing his master rank prowess, Taeju realizes that this man is no ordinary person. He chooses his words carefully, thanking Jung Hak for saving him. Before Jung Hak can introduce himself properly, the talkative porter arrives, asking if Taeju, his fellow porter, is safe. But contrary to what Taeju thought, the fellow porter is actually asking about their luggage, whether it was damaged or not. Now that there are no further problems, the talkative man begins explaining who the person he brought with him is. It is a master, just as Taeju suspected. His name is Lee Young-hak, accompanied by his fellow guild members. Due to his blabbermouth nature, the talkative man keeps feeding Taeju more information about the autonomous committee governing Goryeo, the free city. The man before them is none other than Lee Jung-hak, one of the 3 committee members who actually hold voting rights, the head of the Nogoden Guild in charge of security, and a master rank awakener. Before leaving, the talkative man warns Taeju not to get on Jung-hak's bad side, since it could affect his life in Goryeo. It might be better to avoid crossing paths with him entirely. At first, Taeju pays no mind, but the talkative man insists that Jung Hak is bad news. He takes bribes from the wrong people and often turns a blind eye to real justice. Since this was an emergency, he had no choice but to call for help. Otherwise, he would have had to find someone else to intervene. Taeju realizes that his fellow porter is right. Without a doubt, if Jung Hak had not intervened, he would have been in real danger. A dark expression crosses Taeju's face. It has been over a month since the soul sharing, and he wonders what he's been doing all this time. Just because he escaped his fate as a mono-reject with some easily obtained power, he might have grown arrogant. He feels a pang of shame. For now, he does not want to face Tangun Ak or Indor, who would have been proud of what he has achieved. Taeju promises himself that from now on, things will be completely different. He will make sure he grows stronger in the future. In the free city of Goryeo, deep within the Samhan Empire, the infrastructure is deceptively well established. Yet, beneath the surface of its paved roads, the city's heart is missing a vital beat. The most glaring void, as Taeju quickly noticed, is the lack of proper hospitals. Goryeo is a city of shadows and violence. Legitimate doctors rarely venture here, choosing their safety over a paycheck in a war zone. The few medical practitioners who do call Goryeo home are usually disgraced runaways, malpractice fugitives, and outcasts. Naturally, the citizens have learned that a visit to a local doctor is often more dangerous than the illness itself. As a result, a different power rose to fill the vacuum: the drugstores. In this unique ecosystem, Gruyère's pharmacists hold immense authority. They are legally permitted to bypass doctors, issuing their own prescriptions, and selling potent drugs approved by the empire's FDA or the city's autonomous committee. Business is booming. In a city where trust is a rare currency, buying a sealed bottle from a pharmacist makes far more sense than risking a rusty scalpel at an untrustworthy hospital. Observing this, Taeju saw a golden opportunity: the market for a mutant three-striped mosquito antidote. These insects are a lethal scourge, posing a significant threat even to high-level awakeners. Success didn't come easy. Taeju spent months in the trenches, hoarding every credit earned as a porter, gathering materials in his fleeting spare time, and refining his martial arts at night. To craft an antidote requires delicate mana control, a feat only possible once he finally broke through to the 3-star rank. The hardship bore fruit. Having achieved his 3rd star, he was no longer the weakling who existed just to be a punching bag. He had finally stepped into the realm of the strong. If the deal he's about to propose goes through, his days of scavenging for coins are over. The vision of a future paved in gold is finally within his reach. But first, he has to convince the very pharmacy where he used to be just another desperate customer. He stood before the Bake drugstore. Without hesitating, he stepped inside, bypassing the displays and immediately asking for the owner. The clerk looked up, baffled. It was rare for a random man to walk in and demand the boss instead of browsing the expensive stimulants on the shelves. Taeju simply met her gaze, his voice steady. He wasn't there to spend money, he explained. He was there to offer them a product they couldn't afford to pass up. Hearing him speak with such confidence, almost like a seasoned scammer, the clerk tried to ignore him and burst out laughing. The man restocking the shelves cleared his throat, drawing their attention. He told Taejo that he was the person he was looking for, the owner of the store, Baek Hong Pyo, and also the director of Baek's orphanage. While rummaging through his bag, Taeju introduced himself and explained that he was here to sell a medicine he had personally made. Upon hearing this, Hong Pyo couldn't hide his disappointment, thinking that this young man was just another peddler, one of many who kept coming in trying to sell so-called medicine. He went back to restocking the shelves and told Taeju they weren't interested. Noticing that he looked new to the city, he even suggested that Taeju try the labor market instead, if he wanted to earn money. Still, Taejo didn't back down. He calmly stated that the medicine he was selling was an antidote for the 3-striped mosquito. Before he could dismiss him again, Hong Pyo suddenly stopped what he was doing after hearing exactly what kind of antidote Taeju was offering. He slowly turned around and asked Taeju to repeat himself, wondering if he had misheard. Once again, Taeju clearly stated that the bottle in his hand was an antidote for the 3-striped mosquito. Even so, the old man remained skeptical, questioning whether what this young man was saying was true and if the medicine was even effective. To fully convince them, Taeju added that the antidote could even be taken in advance before entering battle. He explained that its effects could last up to 10 hours after drinking the entire bottle. Hong Pyo began to grow irritated. No matter how Taeju explained it, it sounded impossible. No one had ever succeeded in creating such an antidote. And if he was going to run a scam like this in broad daylight, it should at least be believable. Taeju didn't back down. Instead, he just handed them 2 more bottles and put it on the counter. His confidence was through the roof. He was certain the antidote he had made was effective. He wanted them to test it out, and if they were interested, they could contact him through the number on the card. But he gave them a deadline. They only had until midnight tonight. He said that if he didn't hear from them by that time, he would simply take the antidote to another drugstore instead. The 3 people inside the store were speechless, unsure whether they should believe the young man or what kind of bravado he was showing. One thing was clear to them: this young man must be crazy, just judging by his confidence. One of the customers in the store, Park Jin-soo, a regular awakener, took an interest in the mosquito antidote that Taeju was promoting. He asked Boss Baek if he believed the young man, and whether it could really be a mosquito antidote. For a moment, silence filled the store. What had just happened was undeniably bizarre. Either way, it was difficult for them to judge whether Taeju was telling the truth. To know for sure, they would have to test it themselves. In his mind, Park Jin-soo didn't have high expectations. After all, even the best pharmaceutical companies in the Samhan Empire had failed to create a mosquito antidote. But he couldn't help being bothered by Taeju's overflowing confidence. While he was lost in thought, Park Jin-soo picked up another bottle from the counter. Without much hesitation, he started chugging it. Despite Boss Baek's warnings, especially since it hadn't even been tested for safety. After finishing the entire bottle, he wiped his mouth. He was confused. It tasted like plain water, and there didn't seem to be anything special about it. Even Boss Bake couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. Since Park Jin-soo was a potion junkie and used potions frequently, he would usually feel some medicinal energy, but this mosquito antidote gave him nothing at all. From his experience, it seemed obvious that it was a scam. If it had really been an antidote, Park Jin-soo would have felt some kind of energy. What he had just drunk was nothing more than plain water. After verifying its authenticity, he tossed the bottle aside and suggested to Boss Bake that the rest should go straight into the trash. At first, Boss Bake had hoped it was a real mosquito antidote, but now it was clear the young man was just another scammer, one of the many who came in every day hoping to make a few coins. With his curiosity satisfied, Park Jin-soo pushed his cart to the clerk, counting the medicines he had picked and preparing to pay. He was planning a hunt with his team, but testing that fake antidote had set him back a bit. While Park Jin-soo was paying, Boss Bake started discarding the bottles Taejo had handed over, along with a card containing his contact information. His hopes had been high earlier when he heard it was a mosquito antidote, but after confirming otherwise, he no longer gave it a second thought. That afternoon, at the location where Park Jin-soo and his team had gone, a problem arose. Monsters that weren't part of their target began appearing, like the blade-toothed martens. Now that one of his team members had cleared the rear, they could finally retreat to safety. They could have continued fighting, but one of his members had been bitten by a mosquito and feared she would soon be paralyzed, unable to assist. Park Jin-soo agreed and told them to hold for just a moment. They could retreat after dealing with the monster in front of him. But before they could act, something caught his attention. Suddenly, a swarm of mosquitoes hovered directly toward his face. He froze in terror. If even one bit him here, his mana would scatter, and paralysis would set in. It was already too late. One of the mosquitoes latched on, sucking his blood and injecting poison into his body. Panic surged through him. Collapsing in this situation would mean his entire team would be wiped out instantly, and no one would survive. Little by little, his shield was weakening, and he couldn't help but wonder if he had already been poisoned. He kept thinking about what went wrong. They had known mosquitoes were in the area and had prepared bug-repellent suits. But instead of encountering mutant frogs as expected, they suddenly ran into blade-toothed martens. Because of this, the bug-repellent suits were easily damaged, rendering them useless against the mosquitoes. Not long after, they began getting bitten, and even attempts to retreat were blocked by the martens, cutting off their escape. With no other choice, they had to risk their lives and fight. Only one monster remained. If Park Jin-soo could kill it, everyone in his party could survive. But it looked like he might fail. Suddenly, one of his party members shouted, warning Park Jin-soo, their team leader, to watch out for danger. After suffering several attacks, his shield finally broke down, torn into pieces by the martens' assault. But Park Jin-soo found it strange. Only the shield was destroyed. He hadn't lost any strength, and his mana was still completely intact. A thought formed in his mind, making him wonder what could have caused this anomaly. He remembered that morning when he drank the scammer's antidote, believing it to be real. Before he could get distracted, he reminded himself to focus. He shifted to offense instead of merely defending. Now, all he had to do was defeat the marten in front of him, and they would survive another day. The dark expression on his face transformed into a determined smile. He finally had a fighting chance, and it was all thanks to the antidote he had taken. What he had thought came from a scammer. That night at Bake's drugstore, they were already closing, but suddenly, the front door swung open, ringing the bell. Boss Bake told the customer they were already closed, but froze when he saw the exhausted Park Jin-soo. Despite being tired from hunting all day, Jin-soo hurried to Boss Bake, desperate to buy all the antidote from that morning, willing to pay any price just to get it. The next day, at Gourrier Market, the place was still bustling with people selling all kinds of goods, from frozen monster meat with medicinal effects to armor that protected the body, selling for a high price. Looking around, Taeju was impressed. This was his first time at such a large market, having only ever lived in Paju and Mount Siorak. Because of this, he thought taking a day off today was the perfect idea. He was busy creating the mosquito antidote, which required the third star of the poison spirit art. He needed precise control over his internal energy to extract the antidote's ingredients from both medicinal and poisonous herbs. He overexerted himself. His poison essence overloaded after reaching the third star, so now he needed rest to digest the poison for a while. Besides that night he was contacted by Boss Bake to meet at a cafe for an important meeting. He didn't waste any time. After seeing Taejo, he told him he wanted to sign the contract immediately and would buy everything Taejo had. Seeing how Boss Bake was growing impatient, Taejo guessed that his antidote had really been effective, just as he had thought. Boss Bake didn't deny it. He even told Taejo that this medicine would revolutionize magical beast hunting on Mount Jiri, making him regret not recognizing Taejo as a benefactor sooner. Now that the misunderstanding had been cleared up, Boss Bake asked Taejo how much stock he currently had, worried there might not be enough. But contrary to his expectation, Taejo roughly had 60,000 bottles, and if it sold out again, he could immediately produce more if needed. Seeing this, Boss Bake realized there was nothing to worry about. Boss Bake handed over a contract. The production cost would be 10,000 per bottle, sold for 50,000, including the condition that he would handle all drug approvals and patent procedures for Taejo. It cost no more than 100 to produce a single bottle, but since it didn't need to be disclosed, Taejo kept it a secret. He agreed that these were good terms, and all of his 60,000 bottles would be sold for 3 billion. Minus a 10% tax, what Taejo would receive in the end would total 2.7 billion, something he didn't mind, since the tax was lower than expected. But instead of selling it for 50,000, he wanted an exclusive one-year contract and planned to set the price at 35,000 per bottle. Boss Bake disagreed, saying Taejo didn't need to sell it so cheaply. The true reason Taejo approached Boss Bake instead of other drugstores was because he knew that Bake ran an orphanage. There were even rumors that people were calling Boss Bake the father of all orphans in Goryeo City. So Taejo just wanted to help out a little bit. In exchange, all he asked was if Boss Bake could provide a place where he could manufacture the antidote. Boss Bake's eyes started to water, thinking that Taejo was a kind soul, and about the place he was talking about, he had the perfect spot in mind. Now that everything had been agreed upon, they shook hands to seal the deal. Upon receiving an advance payment, Taejo decided to take the day off and visit the famous Goryeo market to buy some gear. There were all kinds of people and equipment at the market, given how bustling it was. A tanned man, flexing his biceps, called out to Taejo, asking if he was looking for a weapon. Due to the crowd, Taejo asked the man if he was talking to him. He instantly said yes, claiming his shop was the best around and that Taejo didn't need to look anywhere else. He took a liking to Taejo's face, even offering him a special discount. Taejo was immediately weirded out by the bald man and rejected him outright without even seeing what he was selling. But before he could escape, his shoulders were grabbed, making him shudder in fear, a one-of-a-kind fear he had never experienced before. While he was being dragged to the bald man's shop, he realized that the man wasn't an awakener, but he couldn't explain where the overwhelming strength he was feeling came from. Upon arriving, all the weapons the man sold unfolded before Taejo's eyes. Everything seemed incredibly high quality, just like he had claimed earlier. He couldn't believe this was truly the man's capability. He had almost made a regrettable decision because, just like the man claimed, he really was the best. But to be sure, Taejo used his power on his eyes. And just as he suspected, the man wasn't bluffing. Taejo realized he shouldn't judge a book by its cover. He brought out a piece of paper, telling the bald man he needed 100 of these. It was a plan for a weapon called willow leaf flying daggers. Seeing how small they were for throwing knives, the man asked Taejo if he was planning to use them himself. After the confirmation, he thought that the material should be mana steel so that it could deal damage when thrown. Hearing the knowledgeable claims of the blacksmith, Taejo's hope rose, and he asked if he could make them. Without a doubt, the blacksmith said yes, but it would take some time due to a lack of materials. Taejo didn't care and simply asked how much it would cost. All in all, it would come to 250 million, and he only needed to pay a 10% deposit today, alongside a flying kiss, to seal the deal. He expected it to be expensive, but this was too much for a single-use weapon. Either way, he had no choice and decided to pay in full right away. He managed to order the willow leaf flying daggers more easily than he had expected. Now, all he needed to do was find some armor. He wondered if he should get a long martial robe like Unak, and sew pockets into it to carry countless poisons. But after imagining the reactions of the people around him, he felt embarrassed and decided to stick to a modern style. While he was busy thinking about where to get modern armor instead of a long robe, someone with a flyer approached him. It was from a store called Flame Boutique. They had just released a new line of magical beast leather armor, now on display. Instead of a long robe, Taeju thought this coat made with magical beast leather would be better. While Taeju was busy earlier talking to the bald blacksmith, a cadet and her servant had just arrived at Gurye City. They were talking about how difficult it was to get there, and how the people who lived at the castle were big shots from reputable families. Jung Yan-hee, the heir of the Baekdu group and currently a military academy cadet, found it disgusting, those with power hiding away and claiming it was for safety. Hearing her remarks, her servant jokingly called her scary. When she said they came all the way just for a fox leather coat, he instantly denied it, saying it wasn't just any fox coat. It was a Siberian illusion fox leather coat. It was a big deal for her because these foxes had a small population, making hunting them extremely difficult. The leather was rare and had functions that helped regulate temperature, depending on the weather. After hearing this, she changed her mind, realizing the material was truly worth their time. Before she could forget, she brought out a black card, sent by the chairman and told to use freely. It was from Yan-hee's grandfather. Still, she refused to use it, saying she had enough money herself. Once they were done talking, they headed straight to the boutique, as Yan-hee couldn't contain herself any longer. At that time, Taeju was still busy outside roaming when he was handed a flyer. After deciding to take a look, he noticed that there were already customers inside planning to buy the coat he was looking for. But since he was also a customer, the owner didn't ignore him. Meanwhile, Yan-hee's secretary whispered to her boss that it looked like they were not the only ones interested in the coat. She was planning to welcome Taejo and introduce herself, but stopped midway. She recognized Taejo, a porter she had worked with back then, but Taejo didn't seem to remember her face. She explained that about a month ago she had been the mage in the same party when the orcs attacked. After hearing this, Taeju remembered that she was the mage she had accidentally knocked unconscious. He asked her what she was doing here. She simply explained that this was her main job. She had only participated in the subjugation as a side gig when she had the time. Now that she had met Taejo again, she was glad, since she had been looking for him. Hearing this, Taejo turned around, wanting to escape, saying that she didn't need to look for him. He wanted to give her credit for hunting the orcs to avoid drawing attention, so before she could start asking more questions about what happened, Taejo needed to leave. But before he could, she caught his arm, telling him to wait a minute. While stuttering, she mustered her courage and asked Taeju if he was the one who had saved her before. She had been asked by the Nogoden Guild if she had passed out from mana depletion after killing all the orcs, so she figured Taeju must have said something to them under special circumstances. She had just agreed. Still, Taeju denied her claims, telling her that a porter like him couldn't have killed those orcs, and that he had passed out too as an excuse. What Taeju didn't know was that she was genuinely thankful. If not for him that day, they wouldn't have been able to recover their team leader's body. And her lovers. Seeing how sincere she was in expressing her gratitude, Taeju couldn't help but think about how to handle the situation. It was true that he had fought to save a person's life back then, but he had also been selfish, wanting to test his techniques. So he simply told the mage to calm down. But contrary to what he expected, even though he didn't think he deserved the gratitude, the mage was truly happy, calling Taeju her savior. Suddenly, their moment was interrupted by John Yan-hee's secretary, shouting at the mage in anger for making his boss wait. She instantly turned around, apologizing for the delay. She kneeled on the ground and bowed deeply, offering a sincere apology. Unfortunately, she couldn't sell the coat they had just picked out right now. She didn't let it slide. The apology wasn't enough, since they would have wasted their time and effort coming here if they weren't able to get the coat. Still, the mage didn't give up. He tried convincing them that the coat they were trying to buy now had another purpose she needed it for. Seeing how sincere the mage was, truly begging, Jung Yan-hee had a change of mind. She told her secretary that it was enough. No need to waste their breath being angry. The secretary simply reminded her that they needed to go now. Meanwhile, she was dumbfounded. While following after her, she still couldn't fully let go of her anger. They had almost gotten the coat, but her boss said it was fine, since the mage herself had explained she had another use for it. Because of the commotion, Taeju felt uneasy, thinking that the person earlier was an important customer and that he might have caused the mage unnecessary trouble. She insisted that it was okay, and that she should have been the one apologizing to Taeju for the surprise. Now that they were the only ones left, Taeju asked her the sudden reason why she couldn't sell the coat to them. Seeing that Taeju still didn't understand the situation, the mage laughed, calling him dense. Proving her point, he had a confused look on his face, and still didn't know the exact reason. With no other choice, she casually explained that the coat she had been trying to sell earlier would be given to him. Shocked by this news, he asked what she meant by saying she would give the coat to him. She simply wanted to repay Taeju from before by giving him this silver fox leather coat. Taeju denied her kindness, saying he couldn't accept it. He came clean, admitting that he hadn't saved her with good intentions. It had just happened to be a coincidence. But she didn't care. She just laughed, saying the important thing was that she had still been saved by Taeju from danger. If it really bothered him, she said he should save even more people next time, so that no one would lose their lives in vain, like what had happened to her lover. Taeju couldn't help but feel uneasy about the situation. This was the first time in his life that he had received such sincere gratitude from anyone. He had always been met with criticism and disdain, making him used to that treatment. To be honest, it would be a lie to say that this situation wasn't overwhelming. He really hadn't helped her with good intentions. But this warm feeling he felt right now wasn't bad. It was something that made him smile. So, instead of continuing to deny her kindness, Taejo understood and gracefully accepted her repayment for saving her. After succeeding in convincing Taeju, they now went to get his measurements for the coat. Meanwhile, in the celestial realm, the sword immortal was casually floating in the air while riding his sword. Chewing on a plant stem, he complained that he was starting to get bored. There was nothing to do in this damn realm. Everywhere he looked, it was just floating islands. Everyone wore the same clothes, had the same white hair, and the same white beards. Now that he thought about it, there was one person in the celestial realm who was different. He remembered the name, Tang Gun-ak. He had come from the Murim, just like them, but he was the only one who stood out. Not long after arriving, Tang Gun-ak had suddenly gotten a strange haircut, claiming it was a style from another world. He had trimmed his beard and even made a piece of clothing they had never seen before. Seeing as there was nothing else to do anyway, he thought he should ask that guy how to make clothes. After making up his mind, he began flying toward where Tang Gun-ak was. And if he didn't want to teach him, he had something that could change his mind. The thing he was talking about was none other than the heavenly peach of the celestial realm, in exchange for the knowledge of making new clothes.